Everybody. I don't know if anybody's on here quite yet. I figured I'd give it a start a little bit sooner. For those of you who got on a little bit early, feel free to write in the chat if you are here with me today. Um, and I'm going to wait just a little bit to see if we've got some other people on board here. I know I'm a minute earlier. So, for those of you watching this on replay, thank you so much for taking the time to do so. And let me see here if I can just give it a few more seconds. Again, feel free to ask questions in the chat. Let me know that you're here. I know that it's a little bit hard for me to let people know when I'm at a webinar. So just remember, you're not on camera, only myself. So don't feel bad at all about letting me know that you're here in the chat. I hope everybody's having a great day. And I think what I'm going to do is just get started. So my name is Dr. Sue Wiepert. I'm a pediatrician at Purely Pediatrics. This is my first webinar, so thank you so much for being here. And just know that I'm not a techie at all, so these are things that I'm very new at. So let me know if there is any concerns you have during the webinar. The webinar is entitled Your Intuitive Parenting Journey, A Beautiful Beginning. And I was so excited to talk about this today, and I had so many things I wanted to say, and I really had to focus myself to make sure that I'm not overwhelming already overwhelmed parents. I know as a parent, it's one of the most difficult things that I've ever done. And it's difficult not only because I'm raising children. I have two boys, I have an 11-year-old and I have a 13-year-old, but I'm also raising myself as a mother. So I do have a slideshow that's going to be attached to this. So please, I hope you enjoy this. Let me know if there's any questions during the time that you're with me. So let's go to our first slide here. I wanted to first mention matrescence. And matrescence is really the developmental stages of motherhood. So not only do we need to consider the developmental stages of the child, but also the developmental stages of the mother. When you have a baby, no matter whether it's your first baby or whether it's your fifth baby, you are becoming a mother in a different way that you have never expected. I have moms that have their fifth babies that become overwhelmed for different reasons. Every baby's so individual, as well as every mother is so individual too. So I want you to remember that as well, that this is something that's going to be different for every child. I wanted to just point out something as well as I change the slide here. Um, I actually became interested in understanding how to be a parent or an optimal parent or a better parent to my kids because I had anxiety. I had significant anxiety with my boys. I wish I could tell you that I enjoyed motherhood when they were toddlers, but to be honest, it was the hardest thing I have ever done. Um, Trying to understand how to make that parenting journey better for myself as well as other people became um, one of my biggest quests. Is what I want to do is make sure that I can support parents as best as I can. And part of that anxiety, I want you to know that the things that I have learned in my own self development has been intuition is something that we are not encouraged to not only become aware of, but to create in general. I think that is one thing that I always try to tell my families is to trust your intuition. We have to know ourselves as well as our child, and to understand how to connect with our own intuition is so important for so many reasons. And I just wanted to mention intuition is actually inner insight or unconscious knowledge. It's not something that you're necessarily conscious of. And although it sounds that that may be something that in a scientific sense may not be reliable, I do believe that intuition is truly a blessing as we have our children. And to believe that intuition has to do with us as well can help us to deal with our inner anxieties as we're trying to do our very best for our children. I think the most important thing is to realize that we do have intuition. We do need to understand how to create a safe space for that intuition, and to try to find others who respect that as well is really something I want to encourage you to do. Another word that I want to use is mindset. Mindset is something that we can decide every day. We decide what our mindset is. When we wake up in the morning, we can think about all the millions of things we have to do. We can create a mindset of anxiety for ourselves and not even realize that. Or we can create a mindset of some inner peace that kind of focuses on the things that we need to do during that day or during that moment. Our mindset is so important, and to have an intuitive mindset is really something that I want to try to bring to the table here as I try to support you in your parenting quest. Some of my keywords that I love are connection, authentic parenting, giving ourselves grace. So you may hear those things coming out of my mouth, only because I really feel strongly that those are things that as parents we really need to hear. Let's go on to the next slide here. Again, instincts are trustworthy. Intuition is trustworthy. Please remember that as you go through your parenting journey. Please always try to be in touch with how you feel. Often, anxiety is something that we feel when we're not trusting our own instincts. So, try to create a safe space for that for me. The next slide is something I talk about mother and child connection, and in some cultures, the mother and the child are really considered not as separate entities but together. And I think that's a really important way to think about parenting. And in a society such as ours that really seems to encourage more separation from our children, it's something that makes it really difficult for mothers because we are so interconnected with our children. There are times that we feel that being away from our child may not be the best thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about sleep in the towards the end of the webinar. But one of the things I want to mention to any mom is that if it feels uncomfortable for you, it's not right for you and your baby. And in terms of attachment parenting, that's really something that I love the concept of. I didn't know about this when I had my boys, and I love the support and the focus on connection with your baby as well as yourself. So attachment parenting is something, if you have any interest in learning more about that, there's many resources available that can give you a little bit more information on that. But many of my families that do bring their children to my practice know that that's a parenting strategy that I really feel strongly about. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. I wanted to incorporate, we talked a little bit about mindset. Now I'd like to talk about feeding in general. And as moms, I find that feeding is one of the biggest stressors, whether it's breastfeeding a newborn or breastfeeding an older infant. Feeding, even as a toddler, can be challenging for parents. So I wanted to just bring that up, kind of touch the tip of the iceberg with that. Um, Remember that feeding is something that is not necessarily innate. There are strategies that we can learn. There are support that can be given from people who have done it before or people who have taken special training. The one thing I want you to remember is however you decide to feed your baby is up to you. And it is never a wrong decision, no matter what you choose, whether you breastfeed or bottle feed or pump and bottle breast milk or give formula. All of that is very appropriate and very right for you. I have moms that actually will breastfeed, I'm sorry, that will pump and then they will bottle that breast milk, and they will pump every 3 hours, which is truly amazing to me. And then if they come in and they'll mention that no, they don't breastfeed, but they pump and bottle, and I think to myself, my goodness, they have no idea how amazing they are for making the decision to pump and bottle that breast milk to their baby. Um, it's so amazing how we don't really think about the wonderful things that we do until somebody else can point it out to you. So I want to remind you too that moms who decide to bottle formula, that is a total appropriate way to feed your baby. There are many different reasons to do this. And I think that to realize that what you decide for you and your baby are so important. You do not have to justify yourself for your reasons. I have some moms that decide not to breastfeed because it is so stressful. We need to do what is right for us. We are all very individual, and I want to make sure I put that out there that I commend every decision that you make for feeding for your baby. In terms of looking at breastfeeding in general, it is hard. It is not an easy thing to do. It doesn't necessarily come naturally. It's something that I think to seek support for is very important, to know that that support is out there. Um, I myself have required a lot of support for breastfeeding when I had my boys. I remember I wanted to take my lactation consultant home with me from the hospital, and I did connect with her after I was discharged. But remember, when you're discharged from the hospital, that it's there's still support for you. Your pediatrician is there, your pediatric medical community, other moms reaching out to learn about what works for others. But just remember, what works for others may not necessarily work for you. And your job really is going to be to find through trial and error what works for you best with regard to feeding. And remember, whatever choice you make for you is appropriate for you and your baby. I wanted to include in the slides also that with regard to breastfeeding, it can be challenging because we don't know how much milk our baby is getting. We can look at the growth, we can go to our pediatric visits, we can understand when we hear that they're growing well, but sometimes you want to know at home, how do I know? So, in terms of looking at different observations for your baby, take a look at the slide, and you'll get a little bit of indication with regard to how much milk your baby is getting from the softening of your breasts. You listen for swallowing. I often talk to my moms about listening for swallowing when the baby's at the breast. um, Oftentimes the baby will just suckle and won't really swallow, and then we'll know that the baby's really maybe not either getting too tired, or we put them at the breast, and initially they'll suckle really well, and the swallowing may not be occurring. But that's what we work through together. And looking for the stools. I always tell moms, look, and dads too, look for the stools. Stooling's going to tell me if they are getting enough. If I can just reiterate that one more time, it's not the urination, it's the stools that'll tell you if your baby is really getting enough breast milk. And understanding also that babies, we get what we call milk drug. So if your baby is at the breast and they're suckling, and oftentimes it'll be maybe a 10 or 15-minute time, that you'll find that the baby becomes really, really drowsy. We call that milk drunk, and that's also a good indication. So for moms that do decide to breastfeed, just remember there's resources out there. As pediatricians, we welcome your questions. If we can't answer them, we always know where to send you. So, one more item I wanted to mention with regard to breastfeeding is that oftentimes, and not only breastfeeding, but really our kids in general, is to not compare, to try not to compare our children, try not to compare what we do with other families. Really, what I want to do is make sure that we look at the individuality of ourselves and our babies. I'm always reminding my families that try not to compare your little one to another little one next door. Everybody's so different. Developmental growth is a spectrum, it's not just a one point in time. So please remember that, even especially with breastfeeding, too, that can really create some real difficulties for moms that want to breastfeed and aren't doing exactly what their friend is doing with their baby. So just remember that that's something to try not to do. Social media makes it really easy for us to compare, and I think that's something that I really try to make sure that my families understand, that social media can be an evil as well as something helpful. So try to just remember that for me. The next thing I wanted to talk about is going into sleep and just touching the iceberg, tip of the iceberg with regard to sleep. This is a big deal for families, and understanding how to deal with sleep is something that I find is one of the most difficult. Next to feeding, I think sleep is one of the biggest challenges for families. I want you to remember that in terms of sleep training, you can find multiple resources available that talk about different sleep training methods. One of them is called the Ferber method. Do most of them use the cry it out methods? Some of them may be to some extent using that. When I talk about sleep with my families, I don't really talk about sleep training. What I subscribe to is more of a baby led sleep. I want to make sure that we're aware that, again, using our instincts with sleep with our little ones is so important. And I want to just tell you a quick story. I had a mom that reached out to me this week that mentioned that she tried the cried out method. She let her baby um, cry for a good amount of time. She didn't go in the room. She cried. She was outside of the room crying on her own. And it sounds like when she reached out to me that it was just a very, very sad time for them. She asked me for some help with that, and my help with that was really to trust her gut and trust her feelings with what she needs to do with her baby. I did give her a few little pointers that may be helpful, such as a consistent sleep routine, trying to make sure that she gives lots of snuggles before bedtime, that she optimizes feeds before bed, and sometimes that sleep space can be a little bit of a challenge too if families decide that they want to separate their sleep space. That having a separate space may actually make things a little bit easier. Every baby's a little bit different, so we talk a lot about sleep space to families when they come in. But I did ask her, the biggest thing is to trust her intuition, and you know what she did? The next day, she texted me back and said, "You know what? I tried a few of those techniques." She had a few of her own, and she said that they both did well. And I can't tell you how happy that made me when she reached out to me to tell me that. And I didn't give her any specific cry it out methods. I didn't give her anything like that because that's not something I ever would do or ever subscribe to. But I wanted to share that story only because sleep is something that I think we still have to use our intuition. It always comes back for me to our intuition. And I want to make sure that I reiterate that. This next slide is one of my favorites. What if we supported new parents in a way that they never felt that sleep training needed to be an option? Not that it's not an option. I mean, it's there for families that need it. But what if we didn't make them feel that it's an option that they necessarily need to subscribe to? I think that's, again, this is one of my favorite slides because sleep training itself is something that's very different for everybody. So I want to kind of to finish this up with a little bit. This next slide is also one that really touches my heart, and really remembering that motherhood is just about doing our best, that we are not perfect, that we are never expected to be so, and really, we do our best with what we know about ourselves and our child in that moment. We do our best. And as we learn things about ourselves or our baby, then we can improve on those things that we do. Some of the things that one of the buzzwords that I like is expectations. Expectations for ourselves, expectations for our babies. What are those expectations? And are our expectations fair? Are our expectations creating disappointment when it's something that we don't really, that we shouldn't feel disappointed with? Some questions that I ask myself when I feel that I'm struggling is, what are my triggers? What trigger just got pushed? Why am I feeling like this? Just to sit down and give yourself some space to question why you might be feeling the way you are. What do we know about our child's temperament and needs? What do we know about them? Will help us to understand how to better support them. Um, are we meeting ourselves and our child's needs? Are we meeting ourselves and our child where they're at? Meeting somebody where they're at. This is something that I'm learning every day, to realize where somebody is and to meet them in that space. Um, so expectations truly are one of the biggest things that I think we can step back and just try to understand why we're feeling the way we are. Does it have to do with ourself? Is it something that may not necessarily be with the external environment or what our child is doing? Is it from our expectations? um, I want to mention just another, I'm going to switch the slide here, but um, In terms of expectations, a lot of what I feel that we do is we may not understand where our child is on a cognitive level, where their understanding for reasoning is. And just for an example, say that a baby from 0 to 2, they don't have full object permanence yet. It generally starts to develop at the age of 1, maybe a little bit sooner, but object permanence is where, as a human, we understand that something is there even when we can't see it. When we try sleep training methods and we do the cry it out method for a baby who's 4 months or 5 months or 6 months, when those babies don't even have object permanence yet, they don't know that you're not there when they can't see you. To understand that that is one of the reasons why they may cry at night, because they don't know that you're really there. Doesn't that change your whole perspective of trying to understand their sleep and their sleep cycles and where they are with their own development? Oftentimes I'm seeing families start with sleep training at the age of 4 months. Um, that's just so they're just so young. They don't have any sleep object permanence. They don't know that you're even there when you're not in front of them. Another item I always that just when I talk about that, it just is so shocking to me to know that we expect so much from our little ones that don't even know that you're not that don't even know that you're there when they can't see you. So that makes me really sad about that. Say from 2 to 7 years of age, that's when they use their intuition and not so much logical reasoning, but they use their intuition for what feels right. So when we are expecting a toddler to understand even a toddler how to understand how to share or to say they're sorry when something happens to somebody else that they really did by accident, or um, those kids don't understand logical reasoning. So they just know that this little one took my toy and I want my toy back. And that's because for them it doesn't feel right. Do they understand about empathy? Not necessarily. There may be some, but it's so interesting when we change our perspective of where our child is in development, how that can really affect our expectations and how we feel about our little ones and how we parent them. I think that's such an interesting thing for me, and that I often try to remind myself where somebody is, especially where my kids are. Gentle parenting, this slide, I love gentle parenting. Um, Authentic parenting is another term for it, where you learn to be who you are, you learn about who you are, and you bring that to your parenting skills. It's finding the balance between what you need as a mom and as an individual, and bringing that into um, your parenting with your little ones. What we are and what we do directly affects how we parent. And I absolutely love that. I love that we can change our parenting by learning about ourselves. We can feel better about our parenting by learning about what our triggers are, by learning about who we are, and understanding when we're at our best and we're at our worst. I know for me, when I'm tired, I am super stressed. Um, I always know when things are stressful for me because I'm tired. And I'll say to my boys, I'll tell them, listen, guys, I'm really tired today. I want you to just give me a little bit of grace. Mom is just feeling really a little off today. And they get that. They get that. But to understand that in myself first is really key. And it's not easy. So I hope you can see I love all of these. I love how parenting is so connected to how we feel and who we are as people. The next slide is really one of the last ones. Loving your child starts with loving yourself. Loving ourselves is hard, and unfortunately it's hard. As people, we are so hard on who we are. We're so hard on ourselves. We compare ourselves to other people. We listen to what everybody says and let that affect how we feel about who we are. Um, and to realize that valuing yourself can really make a difference in so many aspects of your life. And that's what I want to do. I want to make sure that I spread all of this good information about loving yourself, because in all of my years, I think I have just started to do that. And I want to bring that to you and other parents, that parenting isn't just how you are with your child, it's how you are with yourself, and how you grow with your who you are as a person. Learning a lot about yourself helps you connect with others, and connection with yourself as well as your child, no matter how old they are is crucial to really optimizing your relationship. So, some final thoughts. And again, I'm so happy that you guys are with me, whether it's on the replay or in live. I've had such a great time just talking about some of my favorite things with regard to parenting and really just growth, personal growth. So, some final thoughts as we end here. Make sure connect with your mindset every day. Try to just kind of scan, see how you're feeling that day. If you're tired, if you're happy, if you're stressed, try to understand why that is. And just give yourself even 5 minutes every day to understand where your mindset is at that moment. And sometimes 5 minutes is a hard thing to get when you've got children that are also needy, and they need you, they need TLC. But remember that you need TLC too. And that's important, just to take that time to really kind of figure out what your mindset is at that time. And then let's see if we can improve that by making some focus for the day, by maybe just tackling one or two items for the day, realizing that not everything has to be done at that moment, and giving yourself time to just be, giving yourself time to just be for you as well as your children. Again, I want to just reiterate, parenting is closely intertwined with our sense of self. Our sense of self brings us into intuition, and intuition is our inner insight. All of that is so connected, because I'm asking you to trust your intuition when your intuition is really your sense of self. So, parenting and sense of self are so connected. I wish I knew this a long time ago. And this is why I'm sharing this with you. I want you to walk away from this webinar today feeling empowered, feeling that you want to start this journey, understanding more about who you are, bringing it to your children. Bringing it to your significant others, your family, and being proud of who you are, and being proud of the little wins every day that you have with yourself as well as your child. Um, the last thought I want to put out here is to search for the beauty in your parenting, the beauty in yourself. Parenting is a beautiful journey, and it takes you on this self-discovery as well. And I think for myself, really trying to improve my personal thoughts about me has really improved my parenting. I am by far not perfect. Nobody is, and we should never expect that. But every day, I figure out what my mindset is. I try to bring it into my thought process for the day, and then when I have my children in front of me, I talk to them about it too. I talk to them about their mindset too. So find the beauty in your day. Make sure you remember that you're creating masterpieces. You are right where you are and right where you need to be. Remember that you've got a wonderful group on in terms of other moms, the people that are on my Parenting with a Pediatrician group. Um, reach out to friends, reach out to family. If you guys have any needs, make sure that you realize just how amazing you are. Thank you so much, everybody. If there's any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And again, this will be on replay. You'll be receiving an email about this replay in just probably about 30 minutes. If you want to share it with other people, feel free. Again, it was my first one. I'm sorry if it was a little bit scattered. I had a great time speaking to you, and I'd like to do this a little more frequently and really try to support parents on this wonderful journey. And I'm learning right along with you. So I love this. Thank you so much for being here today. And I appreciate your time. Have a great weekend, everybody.